Welcome to the Kelly and Derek Podcast, the voice of Lakewood, Colorado and beyond. Sponsored by Lakewood News Break World News.
Okay, so you flagged a really interesting piece for us from the Lakewood Informer. It's called Toxic Legacy, Uncovering the Chemical Contamination at the Denver Federal Center.
That's the one, and it's packed with info.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're going to pull out the absolute must-know details for you about the environmental side of things at the DFC, especially, with all this talk about potential changes coming.
Exactly. The article really zeroes in on a key question, I think. As redevelopment gets discussed, what are the environmental facts we really need to get our heads around at the Denver Federal Center? Let's try and unpack that.
Okay, so first off, the Denver Federal Center, the DFC, it's a, huge campus, right? 670 acres over in Lakewood.
Yeah, massive. Home to, over 25 federal agencies?
Sounds like it. Seems pretty standard, government buildings. But this article suggests there's quite a history there we need to be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. And, to really get the context the article is laying out, it's vital to understand the DFC was actually a Superfund site.
Okay, hold on. Superfund site. Let's break that down a bit. What does that actually mean for a place like the DFC?
Right. So think of a Superfund site. The article explains this pretty well. It's a place the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has flagged as having, serious hazardous waste contamination.
Serious, okay.
Yeah. This all falls under a federal law called CERCLA. It's a bit of a mouthful. Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act.
Gotcha.
But basically, it gives the EPA the authority, and importantly, the funding, to clean up these really polluted sites, to protect people and the environment.
So this wasn't just some minor contamination issue then?
Not at all. And the article specifically points out, too, that the DFC is not what they call a brownfield site.
Ah, okay. What's the difference there? Why does the article stress that?
Well, it's an important distinction. Brownfields are usually like former industrial sites with some contamination, but often less severe. They're often looked at for redevelopment potential.
Right, revitalization projects and things.
Exactly. But the article emphasizes that the DFC's contamination was way more extensive, serious enough to get that Superfund label. It tells you something about the scale of the problem they were originally facing.
Right, scale is key. And that history really starts back in World War II, doesn't it? The article mentions it was the Denver Ordnance Plant.
Yeah, that's where it all began. It was a massive operation for the war effort.
How massive are we talking?
The article says they were churning out over 6,000 cartridges.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Wow. Just imagine the materials involved, the waste.
Exactly. And that kind of wartime production, the article makes it clear it came with a pretty significant environmental cost.
I bet. What kind of things were they using?
A lot of hazardous chemicals were used and disposed of. The article lists some of the main culprits found there: industrial solvents, petroleum products, heavy metals, and those really persistent pollutants, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls.
Nasty stuff. And stuff that sticks around.
Definitely. And you have to remember, back then, environmental rules, even awareness, just wasn't what it is now.
Right. The article mentions waste just being buried in landfills across the campus.
Pretty much. Disposal methods were, let's say, primitive by today's standards, as the article puts it.
So naturally, those chemicals got into the ground.
Yeah. They leached into the soil and really critically into the groundwater. And what's particularly concerning, the article notes, is that this contamination didn't just stay put on the DFC property.
Oh, it spread.
Some of it migrated off-site, which, raises concerns about the surrounding communities and maybe their water sources.
That is worrying. Did the article mention any specific examples of that?
It did, yeah. There was a specific leak near Building 52, a chemical called 1101-trichloroethane, TCA for short.
Okay.
An underground storage tank failed, released this TCA, and it created this plume in the groundwater that, unfortunately, contaminated some nearby wells.
Wow. So it really shows how past actions can have these long, lingering effects.
Absolutely.
So, okay, massive contamination. There must have been a huge cleanup effort, right? The article mentions some pretty staggering numbers for waste removal.
Oh, the remediation was incredibly extensive. They dug up and removed over 775,000 tons of waste.
775,000 tons.
Yeah, and more than 340,000 tons of contaminated soil. The article specifically points to Downing Reservoir as a big source of that removed soil, so they clearly focused efforts there.
And all that work meant the DFC actually came off the Superfund list back in 2012, right? Which sounds like, mission accomplished.
It does on the surface.
Yeah.
The article confirms the EPA delisted it because those cleanup goals were officially met. But, and this is a really crucial point the article makes immediately after, it suggests that if redevelopment happens, then further testing might be needed. It's sort of like saying, look, we cleaned up based on the standards and knowledge then, but digging things up could change the picture.
That makes total sense. You start moving earth around, you might uncover or spread stuff that was thought to be stable. Now, the article also talks about something current, a water discharge permit the DFC operates under right now.
Yes, that's important. This permit was issued September 2022. It runs until August 2027.
And what does it allow them to do?
Basically, it allows the DFC to discharge treated water into McIntyre Gulch, and that flows into Lakewood Gulch and eventually into the South Platte River.
Which is a major water source for the area.
Very significant one, yes.
Are there checks in place? Monitoring?
There are. The article mentions 8 specific monitoring points, outflows, between the DFC and the South Platte, so they are tracking water quality.
Okay. And who holds the permit? What happens if the land is sold?
That's key, too. The permit isn't tied to the specific federal agencies there now. It transfers with the property if it's sold. So a new owner inherits that permit and its conditions.
Okay, and here's where the article really seemed to raise a red flag. It mentions a specific condition in that permit.
Yes, a really critical one. The permit requires notifying the EPA in writing about any planned physical alterations or additions to the facility.
Right. And the big question the article poses, almost directly to you, the listener, is, with all this talk of redevelopment, has that EPA notification actually happened?
It's a huge question, isn't it? And the article follows that up by voicing these concerns about, well, what happens if you do disturb the ground during construction?
It's like we were saying.
Could chemicals that were maybe locked in the soil get into the water runoff or even become airborne dust?
And then there's the cost question.
Right. Who pays if new environmental problems pop up? Would that fall on, say, the citizens of Lakewood? The article definitely puts that question out there.
The article also mentions something technical, a permeable reactive barrier. What's that about?
Yeah, it sounds complex, but it's basically an underground treatment system. The article references a chemistry case study from back in 2001 describing it.
Okay. How does it work?
Think of it like a filter built into the ground. It's described as a funnel and gate system. Contaminated groundwater is directed or funneled through these reactive gates.
And the gates clean the water.
The materials inside the gates are supposed to react with the contaminants, neutralize them, or break them down as the water flows through. So it's an active, ongoing treatment happening underground.
But it sounds like there might be issues. The article mentioned problems assessing how well it's working.
That's right, specifically with 2 of the 4 gates. It seems it's difficult to tell how effective they are because of ongoing contamination from TCE, trichloroethylene, and DCE, dichloroethylene.
So the presence of those chemicals makes it hard to judge the barrier's performance, or maybe indicates the barrier isn't fully working on them.
It suggests, that those parts might not be cleaning the water as well as intended. And connecting this back, the article drops a pretty startling fact from the original site investigations.
What's that?
They initially found 26 different chemicals at the DFC. And get this, 12 of those are known carcinogens, cancer-causing agents.
12? Wow. That's significant.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this leads directly to another major question the article puts forward. Have the current players, the developer, the City of Lakewood, the Water Board, have they actually tested for all 26 of those original chemicals as part of looking into redevelopment?
That seems like a pretty fundamental question, doesn't it?
Absolutely critical. Just because it's off the Superfund list doesn't mean every single potential risk, especially from all those original chemicals, is completely gone or understood, particularly if you start digging.
Okay. The article also makes a point of listing some upcoming public meetings. Seems like this is becoming a more public discussion now.
Yeah, public awareness seems key here. The article gives dates: April 21st, 7 p.m., a virtual study session with City Council and the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority, or LRA.
Okay.
Then May 8th, 6:30 p.m., a movie screening Half-Life of Memory, sounds relevant. And May 12th, 7 p.m., a City Council meeting with a public hearing about creating an urban renewal district, a metro district, and parkland stuff.
So opportunities for people to learn more and maybe speak up?
Definitely. These seem like key dates if you're interested in this.
And the article adds another little detail. The author tried to connect with city officials.
Yeah, it mentions the author emailed the mayor and city council back on April 7th, asking to talk about the project.
Eh,
As of when the article was written, apparently no response.
that lack of response itself seems noteworthy.
It certainly raises questions about, communication and transparency around the whole thing.
So finally, the article sets up what's coming next in their series, part 2.
Right. It says part 2 will focus more on the city of Lakewood's role, specifically the Planning Commission and that Lakewood Reinvestment Authority, the LRA.
Looking at how they handle land use decisions when these kinds of environmental concerns are involved, especially with projects like one called The Bend.
Yeah, so it sounds like the next part will dive into the local government angle and the planning side. And the article wraps up this first part with a really potent thought.
What was that?
It says, when contamination meets redevelopment, what you don't know can hurt you. And the cost of looking the other way may be too high.
That's quite a closing statement. Really frames the stakes.
It really does. Underscores the need for caution and thoroughness.
Okay, so to kind of pull this all together for you, our listener, what we've seen from this article is the DFC's past, this history of serious contamination from wartime production.
Right, followed by a massive cleanup that got it off the Superfund list. But, and it's a big but, there are these lingering questions, these ongoing concerns about what might still be there, especially if the site gets redeveloped.
Yeah, and we talked about that current water discharge permit, the conditions attached to it, like needing to tell the EPA about physical changes. Big questions there.
And the questions about whether testing has been done for that full list of 26 original chemicals, including those 12 carcinogens. Plus, that reactive barrier maybe not working perfectly.
And finally, these upcoming public meetings where these issues might get debated more openly.
It's clearly a really complex situation. You've got this history colliding with future plans. The article really stresses how vital things like transparency, proper environmental checks, and accountability are going to be moving forward, for the community's health and the environment.
Absolutely. So this deep dive into part 1 leaves us, and you, with something important to chew on, I think. Considering everything we've just discussed, the history, the known contamination, the unknowns, what questions do you think really need to be asked, need to be prioritized as the future of the Denver Federal Center gets decided?
Yeah, and maybe think about responsibility, too. What role do the different players, developers, the city, the residents themselves, what responsibility does each have to make sure this goes forward safely and, well, with everyone knowing the facts?
Good points. We definitely encourage you, if this is something that concerns you or interests you, to maybe check out the full article in the Lakewood Informer.
And perhaps even attend those public meetings mentioned. It's a chance to get more information firsthand and really form your own informed view as this story develops.